Let's close the door. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopijana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashoda Nandana Padajana Ranjana Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Padajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavini ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Alrighty. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right. On its 14th day of September, whoops. I have my own book. All right, let's start again. Okay. On this 14th day of September, 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And someone has moved my placeholder, so let's see, we did that one. Okay. Yeah. All Okay. Okay. So on this, oops, let's start again. Sorry about that. So on this 14th day of this September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana-yoga, text number 34 on page 287. Do you want to get this? 287. Text number 34. Do you see it? Yeah. Okay. 34? 34. All right, I'm just going to chant it through. All right. Chanchalam hi manaḥ Krishna pramati balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram. Chanchalam hi manaḥ Krishna pramati balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram. Chanchalam hi manaḥ Krishna pramati balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram. Anyone on Zoom?
I will try.
Give it a try.
Chalan hi manaḥ Krishna pramati balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram.
Very good.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to read the word by word. Chanchalam, flickering, he, certainly, manaḥ, mind, Krishna, O Krishna. Pramati, agitating, balavat, very strong, dridham, obstinate, tasya, its, aham, I, nigraham, subduing, manye, think, vayoho, of the wind, eva, like, sudushkaram, difficult. Arjuna says, the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Purport. The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence, although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy. But ultimately, no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. In the Vedic literature, the Katha Upanishad 1.3.3-4, it is said, Atmanam ratinam vidhi, shariram ratamevacha, buddhim tu sadatim vidhi, manak pragrahamevacha. Indriyani hayan ahur, vishayangs teshu gocharan, atmendriya mano yuktam, bhoktet yahu manishinaha. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. Close quote. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence, as an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Caitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance in all humility. The method prescribed is savai kṛṣṇa-padāravindayoḥ. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna, Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So in these two verses, Arjuna has laid out his main objection to practicing Ashtanga Yoga. And because Ashtanga Yoga is a process of controlling the mind, making the enemy mind into the friend mind. We may remember that Udaret Atman Atmanam Atmanam Abhasadiet Atmaivan Atmano Bandur Atmaiva Riparatmanaha. That one should uplift oneself, elevate oneself by the mind, not degrade oneself. The mind can be the worst friend of the living entity, or his best, the worst enemy, or his best friend. And that mind which is absorbed in material desires and anger and resentments and material plans and all of these things reside is the worst enemy of the living entity because it keeps him bound to this material world. But that mind which is full of thoughts of Krishna and the holy name and how to serve Krishna, how to spread Krishna consciousness is the best friend of the living entity. So how to train the mind? The key is the intelligence, because the intelligence, as mentioned here, is meant to be in charge of the mind. I don't know if I said Om Jnana yet. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. And so this very prayer itself that we chant, that we utter before trying to speak on this transcendental knowledge is very pertinent to these verses. We're born in the darkness of ignorance. But by the mercy of the spiritual master, he gives us the means by which to come out of that darkness. He opens our eyes with actually it's a medical instrument, the shalakaya, you know. So the idea is that it takes a dynamic and a empowered spiritual master, instructor, who can implant that faith and give us the spiritual strength to perform the practices, chiefly chanting Hare Krishna, by which we can subdue this powerful mind which for millions of years has kept us bound to this material life and suffering. So I'm always reminded, page 287, I'm always reminded in many cases, it would go through the Gita, of that section of the Bhagavad Gita at the end of the 3rd chapter, which is very pertinent here. Because Arjuna asked the question, it's all about acting in sacrifice, and how in the 3rd chapter, understanding the necessity of not becoming attached to fruit of activities and the fruits of the activities. So then at the end, Arjuna says, well, what is it? Attakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichanna vivarshanaya balari vinayojita. So what is it that seemingly by force makes us act in ways that we know are even bad for us? What is that? It's kama. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajogana samudbhava mahashano mahapapma vidyanam vaidinam. That Krishna answers that it is lust only, Arjuna, which then is transformed into wrath, great anger. When the strong desire is frustrated, then it turns into wrath, and which is the all-devouring, sinful enemy in this world. So we learn that the mind can be the worst enemy, and that mind which is saturated with lusty desires, impelled by strong material desire, is our enemy, life after life, because the mind does not perish when the gross material body goes. So what's the effect? First of all, he gives different degrees that one could be covered by lust. In the mode of ignorance, the covering is very powerful. The mode of passion is still very powerful, not quite as gripping. And in the mode of goodness, it's less so. And we can bring the strong intelligence to bear to control the lust as possible. So he gives different, fire is covered by smoke, as mirror is covered by the dust, or as the embryo or the fetus is covered by the womb, so the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So that's the sinful enemy. What is its effect? Arvitam gyanametina gyanino nityavidina. Kama rupena kontaya dushpurdena lenacha. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness. So the living entity is known as the Jnanina, the knower. This is our nature. We're conscious. We're the knower of the body, the kshetragya. So the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied, which burns like fire. And then he describes the hierarchy. Indriyani manobuddhir asyadhisthana muchyate. Oh no, he's describing the places that lust has taken over, like an enemy will capture different strategic points. The senses, the mind, and intelligence are the sitting place of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Well, the senses, it's very, very clear how they're sitting places of lust. The senses are demanding. The tongue is demanding to eat something nice, and the eyes want to see something beautiful. Ears want to hear it, and so forth. The genital wants to engage in its activity. So there's the demands, but there's also the mind is also a place. So many ideas, and the intelligence. So many plans of how to to achieve what you look at. So they work together, the mind, senses, intelligence, infected with this lust. And the result is then, it covers the real knowledge of the living entity. Jnanam avrite. This is also from the previous verse, so he's emphasizing the point. Our real knowledge is covered by material desire. So then there's a tasmat verse. Therefore, what to do? Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava. Therefore, in the beginning, you have to control the senses. Papmadam pradihiyayam jnana vijnananashanam. And thus, by regulating the senses, slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So how is it at the beginning, even in Bhakti Yoga, you control the senses? Well, you have to stop, you have to stop all of these sense activities, sensual engagement, and letting lust flow out through the senses, mind, intelligence. And you have to stop long enough to chant Hare Krishna. And you have to stop the mind long enough to hear Hare Krishna, to pay attention. So this is how you, in the beginning, you have to control. Now, in the beginning of the Ashtanga Yoga system, what do we have? Yama. Now, yama, niyama, asana, right? Yama are the don'ts. You have to stop. You have to stop all four pillars of sin that we have regular principles. You have to stop that. If you continue to do that, you can't even begin Bhakti Yoga. At least for this time, you come to the temple and so forth, and then you stop those things and you engage the senses in something wholesome. And therefore, Arjuna, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So jnana and vijnana nashanam. So this is our enemy. And then he gives a hierarchy. Indriyani paranyahu, indriyebhak parang manaḥ, manasastu parabuddhi yobadhe padatastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses, intelligence higher than the mind, and the soul is even higher than the intelligence. And then the last verse of the chapter, Evam buddhe padam buddha sangstabhyapanam atma jahi shatna mahabaho kamarupan darasaram. Thus, knowing oneself, the soul, to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, that is, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Now, it's not so easy. So he describes in the next chapter that this yoga, what yoga is that? He mentioned the previous, Krishna consciousness. I spoke this to the sun god who gave it down to Vivasvana, who gave it to Ikshvaku, like that. He's giving the pedigree or the source of the Bhagavad Gita. So back to chapter 6. So Arjuna is complaining that I can't practice this. I'm a fighting man. I'm a householder. I'm not about to go off to the forest and sit alone, and practice pranayama and so forth. And this famous verse, Chanchalam himana Krishna pramati balabhadraham. The mind is very flickering, it's very obstinate, it's very strong. And he thinks that to control is like trying to control the wind. And indeed it is. Without the techniques of Krishna consciousness, it is impossible. Now why is Krishna consciousness so powerful? This Hare Krishna mantra, that's the chief practice we have. Because as soon as one chants, and even with a little attention, he's hearing the mantra, hearing and chanting, hearing and chanting, hearing. You are directly in touch with Krishna. And Krishna is Madana Mohan. He bewilders Cupid. In other words, that kama, which is sex desire, but is all the other strong desires too, can be sublimated into desire for Krishna. The more that we become Krishna conscious. That's the basic fact of Krishna consciousness. It always works. If somehow or other you come in contact with the chanting, and you're able to place your mind on it, you have to hear it, and for some time, because we go out on Harinam. You know, I've been out on many Harinams, not lately, but you know, my career, 50 years, and so many people walking by. We did Harinam here in downtown every Friday night for many years. So people are hearing it. They're hearing it in one sense, but it's just they're not really hearing it. They're not paying attention. They're walking by. Yeah, they made the intelligence is saying that's whatever it is. That's some cult, or you know, that's not for me. I have my own religion, or who cares, you know. Or these days they got stuff in their ears and they're on the phone. They can't even hear anymore. This is the age, right? Everyone's always on the phone. So distraction. So they're benefited, but it's just you know, they get a little bit of blip and then they're down more in the modes. But those who stop to listen, they're fortunate souls. For whatever reason, you know, we would get sometimes, we'd have a big party, you get a crowd, you know. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you know, they'll hear and they're fortunate. Those who get a little pamphlet which will explain it, which helps to purify the intelligence. See, the intelligence, oh, now I understand what they're chanting, why they're chanting, you know, that's interesting. Let me see if I can get a book, or, you know, get Hare Krishna online, you know, somehow or other. In other words, there's some captivation there. So the idea is that the mind can be subdued only by Krishna. We can't do it ourselves. So we have to pray, like Kunti prays. Vaime ananyavashaya mati marapate sakrit. Asakrit. No, krit, sakrit, asakrit. Ratamun vahatarabdha gange vaugamadhanvati. Do you know this one, Arjun? This one you should know. 1-840 or so. It's a great prayer. I put it into a poem. O Madhava, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of thee, not any other kind. As Ganges torrent flows into the sea, let all my love flow constantly to thee. Now, why would one pray like that? Because one understands the great value of always remembering Krishna and always loving Krishna. But now, I'm still fighting with that mind after all these years. You know, the mind is taking me away. So you please help me, because Krishna is a super soul. There's a prayer, Prabhupada gives a translation. It's a song, actually, by Rupa Goswami. He gives a translation, I think, in the first canto purport or second canto. And it goes like this. Krishna bhavandam, this is the refrain. Krishna bhavandam vande manmanasamadakadama payanita patapankachamakadanle. I should have brought my little app. You heard this? Yeah. So it's a prayer. It's a Krishna. Oh Krishna, dearest Lord, I bow to you and then entreat. Please place the bee of my restless mind in the honey of your lotus feet. So that's the same idea. Restless bee, you know, the restless wind going everywhere. So he said, Krishna, I can't control my mind. Please, you control it. You place it, you know. So then it goes on. He says, Yadapi samadusha vidadapi pashyati nadamanaka kamiricham idamidshami nishammitabachata tadapikipabhadavicham. Despite great effort, though even Brahma, deep in trance, cannot achieve his goal, a glimpse of your effulgent toenails, soothing to the soul. Because, O Lord, I've heard of your compassion's endless waves, that very vision is the only boon my poor heart craves. And then they refrain. Krishna bhavandam vande manmanasamadakadama payanita patapankachamakadanle. Please place the bee of my restless mind in the honey of lotus feet. So in other words, we're recognizing our helplessness, just like Arjuna here. You know, he said, I can't practice this Ashtanga yoga. So, but he's got Krishna right in front of him, so Krishna's going to, you know, is protecting him. But Arjuna is representing us. So, yeah, it's foolish to try to insist that I'm going to practice Ashtanga yoga. Because after all, the goal is one. The goal is to be free of bondage of the material senses, mind, and intelligence, which are addicted to this material world, and to be completely absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, of God. And that absorption in the thought, and absorbing our senses and our mind intelligence, that will take us back to God and out of this material bondage and back home, back to the spiritual world. So that's the goal. And what's the practical way to achieve it? That's the whole idea. So here, Rupa Goswami is teaching us is that the most practical goal is to pray ardently that Krishna, you help me, please help me to fix my mind on your lotus feet. You know, that's what the Hare Krishna mantra is in essence, a prayer, right? Please engage me in your service. So here he's articulating how the intelligence can feel and think, you know. So even Brahma has trouble, you know, meditating on your lotus feet. He's got so many headaches. He's got 4 times many headaches as we have. Trying to do this creation, you know, and Indra, he goes down because he's very passionate. But he's he's an administrator of the universe, the weather and running the heaven. So you know the story, he once got cursed because he had illicit sex with some demigod's, you know, a Brahmin's wife or something. So he got cursed to become a hog. And so he's down there as a hog. He forgot his wife was Indra. And he gets married, you know, and then he has hoglets, and he's living in hog heaven. Indra. He's king of heaven, but it's hog heaven now. So, but Brahma says, what's going to happen now? He's got this headache, you know. Now who's going to manage the affairs of the heavenly planet? So he goes down there, and he tells Hog Indra, says, forget it, you know, Indra, give up this degrading life. I need you to take you back to the heavenly planets. So Prabhupada tells us, he says, I can't go. I've got my responsibilities. I got my wife, I got my little hoglets to take care of, you know, and I don't want to go. So Prabhupada usually doesn't tell the story completely. They get him back there, but he just illustrates as one can become completely forgetful, you know, and get wrapped up. But actually, Brahma, he kills the family, you know, the shock. He says, break his attachment. It's the shock, you know, but he gets him back up that way, you know. But the point is that you can become attached, so attached that you don't even understand the importance of bhakti. So once you understand the importance of it, then you have to adopt a practical means by which to drag the mind and the senses away from their entanglement in matter and get entangled in Krishna. You know, that's real vairagya. You know, the definition of vairagya by Rupa Goswami. So it's interesting because this word raga means we're supposed to be raga anugas. We want to get this raga for Krishna. You know, really strong attachment for Krishna. That's raga anuga, follow in the footsteps of those who are so attached. His friends and Mother Yashoda, they're too super attached to Krishna. And Radharani and the gopis. That's the ideal, you know. So, but then there's this thing of vairagya. No attachment, but no attachment for matter. So how to switch the attachment from Krishna, matter to Krishna? So, anasaktasya vishayan. Yatarham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya mukchate. This is yukta vairagya, real, yeah. So he says, without attachment to the object of the senses, but where appropriate, engaging those very objects in the service of Krishna. You know, the things that we would desire, very nice foodstuffs. We don't just go in and eat, you know, from the boga. You know, that's Maya. You take the boga and say, oh, let me prepare something nice for Krishna. So you're thinking of Krishna, how he will enjoy what you prepare. You prepare it very nicely, very clean, with good consciousness, you know. And then when you offer it, and with prayers, you know, and he eats it, he may leave it there for you, but he eats it by even seeing it. Because what is that verse, you know? Angani yasa sakalendriya vittimanti. In the Brahma Samhita, Brahma says any one of the senses can perform the function of all the others. So just by seeing the food, he sees the devotion, he sees the love, he's eating in that sense. But he leaves the remnants. Then it becomes sanctified, you eat it, you become purified. So that's yukta vairagya. Vairagya is essential. That is a measure, really, of your success in Krishna consciousness, is that you get more and more distaste for the material things, you know. And then there's polgu vairagya, because the Mayavadis also they know they have to become detached from matter, but they don't have the nice means of chanting and dancing and, you know, doing everything we do. So their means is, intellectual. We'll read Vedanta all day, and we'll practice some of these austerities, very severe, and in this way we become detached. But it's not as efficient. It's called polgu. Polgu means weak. Polgu, weak detachment. So what is their characteristic? Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vastunak. Prapanchikataya means thinking everything is material. Doesn't matter, the holy name is just a sound. The food is just, prasadam is just ordinary food. This is a hellish mentality according to the Shastra. But that's their mentality. So what to do? You know, if they take prasadam and enjoy a pakora, that's maya. You know, they don't make the distinction because they don't have the bhakti mentality. So that's everything is material. Even those things related to Krishna, they think are maya. Hari sambandhi mumukshubi parityagi. Because they want the mukti. They don't want bhakti, they want mukti. You know, that's a material desire ultimately. Parityaga means giving everything up. Renouncing anything that might possibly be pleasing. And then vairagyam polgu kachyate. They said this is weak vairagya. It's not powerful like the devotees' vairagya, where you find Haridas Thakur, the beautiful prostitute, comes in the middle of the night and he's just chanting Hare Krishna. For her benefit, he sticks around and he's chanting. He's not at all attracted. He's not tempted. He's not allured. He's simply mercifully staying there for her purification. And after 3 nights of that, you know, she's purified. He's not at all contaminated because he's so fixed. The holy name has completely captured his mind, his senses, and his heart. You know, how could he be attracted? So that's powerful vairagya. That's yukta vairagya. Whereas the impersonalists, they easily fall down. Who is it? Was it Vishwamitra was meditating in the forest, right? Very powerful yoga. He was so probably give the example. I never read it in the Shastra that he was able to create a tree from which human beings were coming like fruit. Yeah, you know. So he's meditating, you know. But I think it was Indra sent down because they were always worried that, you know, he's going to become so powerful, he'll take my post. So they send down Menaka. I think it was Menaka. Yeah. And just by the ankle bells, you know, of course he had his eyes closed, but the ankle bells, oh, what's that? And then he sees, you know, this heavenly damsel there, you know, he falls down and Shakuntala is born, the whole thing. So, but Haridas Thakur, forget about the ankle bells. She came in and was showing, you know, she's doing her thing, you know. And he said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Just let me finish my rounds. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. She becomes purified. So that's the difference, the power. So, how to conquer this material desire? Kama. This is, which resides in the mind, is so powerful. And it's a process of yoga, but this Ashtanga yoga is not going to work in this age for us. All right, any comments, questions on this important verse, text 34? Arjun's lament, too powerful. So Bhagavad Krishna is going to encourage him in this process of Ashtanga yoga first. Okay, text 35, I'll say, you say. Asankshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Lord Shri Krishna said, Almighty, I am the son of Kunti. It is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. There you get the vairagya again, you see that? Purport: the difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality of Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment it is possible. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the supersoul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind in spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. This attachment is called pareshanubhuti. Actually, it's pareshanubhuti, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. So throughout the Bhagavatam, there's so many verses that deal with this. At the very end of the second or third, I forget, chapter of the second canto, there's a wonderful verse describing this. Pabantiye bhagavata atmanaksatam katamatam shavanaputesha sambritam punantite vishayavadushatashayam vajantitachadanasadoruhantikam. You think you could learn that one? You think you could learn it? I'll help you. Yeah. Okay. So he says, Pabanti means drinking, just like at the beginning of Bhagavatam. Pabanti Bhagavatam Rasamaliyam. The third verse says, drink this Bhagavatam. So he says, Pabanti Bhagavata Atmanaksatam Katamratam. So those who are Atmanaksatam, who are devotees of the Supreme Lord, when they drink the description of his name, pastimes, qualities, and form, Bhagavad Atman Katamratam Shravanapateshu Sambritam, and they drink through the ears, and they're fully satisfied by this nectarian beverage, as it were. Then Punanti Te Vishayavadushatashiyam. They purify the polluted aim of life known as sense gratification. In other words, the mind becomes purified and attracted more and more to Krishna and more detached and unattracted to Maya. So Punanti is purified. Punanti Vishaya Vidushatashiyam. This is a very nice phrase. Vishaya are the senses, the sense objects. Vidushatashiyam. Ashaya is the desire. And Vidushata, yes, with the polluted, with the contaminated desire for sense gratification. Vishaya Vidushatashiyam. Punanti, the heart is purified, same as Lord Caitanya says, Darpana Marjanam. And what's the result? Punanti Vishaya Vidushatashiyam Vajanti Tacharana Sororuhantakam. And they go back to a place in the spiritual world nearby the lotus feet of Krishna. So, Pabandiye Bhagavata Apanapakam Katamatam Shavanapatesha Samritam Punandi De Vishaya Vidushatashiyam Vajanti Tacharana Sororuhantakam. Another verse Prabhupada would always quote is the teachings of the 4 Kamaras to Maharaj Prithu in the 4th canto, which we read some time ago. But I always remember this verse, and Prabhupada would quote it a lot. Yat para pangaja palasa balasa bhaktya karmashayam guditam udgutayanti santa tadvanna riktamatayo yatayopi ruddasroto ganastamaranam bhajavasadevam. So the 4 Kamaras are almost winding up their instructions to Prithu, and he says, Yat pada pangaja, that the Lord's lotus feet. Yat pada pangaja palasha vilasa bhaktya, who are enjoying the bhakti rasa observing the tips of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. Yapada Pankata Palasha Bilasa Bhaktya Karma Shayan, the desire for karmic activity, fruitive activity. Karma Shayam Gratitam, which are like knots in the heart, Granta, Udgratayanti, they're untied by this process, or cutting the knots. Karma Shayam Gratitam Udgratayanti Santa, for the saints, for the devotees. So that's the first two lines. Then he contrasts them with those who have no devotion. They may be gyanis, they may be yogis, whatever. Tadvanna rikta matayo. Rikta matayo means their minds are empty of bhakti. They're devoid of any bhakti. They may be yogis, whatever, but they don't have any bhakti. Tadvanna rikta matayo yatayo pirudna. Although they strive very hard sometimes, like these yogis Krishna is describing. Srotoganas, their minds eventually are overcome by the strong flow of material desire. Because the yoga process doesn't, generally, I mean, in rare cases it works, but it's very, very strict and austere. But generally it's very hard to uproot those desires, just like Vishwamitra and other yogis which fall down. Or Durvasa. Durvasa is easily angered, when he's not honored properly. That's the whole thing with Ambarish. Very proud. That's a disease of the heart. The pride, proud of his yogic prowess, the cities. So he's envious of Ambarish, humble. He's a king, but he's very humble, and he's completely, everything is engaged in Krishna service. So you know the story, Durvasa. So anger, lust, these things overcome the mind of those who are not devotees. So that, therefore, say the four Kauravas, you are advised to worship Vasudeva. That's practically the end of their instruction. So Krishna will come to that point at the end of the chapter. So here he's saying, undoubtedly it's difficult, but it's possible by vairagya and by determination, abhyasena, by practice, All right, so next verse. Text 36. Asangyatatmana yogo dushprapa iti me matihi vashyatmanatu yatata shakyo vaptum upayataha. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Purport: the Supreme Personality of Godhead declares that one who does not accept the proper treatment to detach the mind from material engagement can hardly achieve success in self-realization. Trying to practice yoga while engaging the mind in material enjoyment is like trying to ignite a fire while pouring water on it. Yoga practice without mental control is a waste of time. Such a show of yoga may be materially lucrative, but it is useless as far as spiritual realization is concerned. Therefore, one must control the mind by engaging it constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Unless one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he cannot steadily control the mind. A Krishna conscious person easily achieves the result of yoga practice without separate endeavor, but a yogi practitioner cannot achieve success without becoming Krishna conscious. Yeah. So, it's all the mind. If the mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult. And so Prabhupada lays it on the line here, that one who does not accept the proper treatment to detach the mind from material engagement can hardly achieve success in self-realization. Now, oftentimes in this chapter, especially because it deals directly with formal yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and Prabhupada saw when he came to America. After all, the first place he came to in Manhattan was a yoga studio by Dr. Mishra. He had befriended him and he was able to stay with him. But after Prabhupada spoke first to his students and talked about bhakti, he wouldn't let him speak anymore because the guy was a Mayavadi. He was, and Prabhupada was against that. So they were friends, but he kept them in. So Prabhupada needed his own place. They finally got it in 22nd Avenue. But he actually saw the show of yoga, which is not really geared toward self-realization, but is toward physical benefit. I did that yoga for a long time. I had no idea. So that's not the real purpose of yoga. The purpose of yoga is to withdraw the mind from material entanglement and place it on the absolute truth. So it's possible, yatata. Yatata means to strive. This word keeps coming up again. The very word yati is a word for a sannyasi, because they always have to strive, you know. But we have to strive in the right, you know, for the right goal with the right means. And unless you know that, then you're going to strive, you know, like driving very nicely and fast, you know, in the wrong direction. You're getting further and further from your destination, isn't it? That's the problem. You know, you have to know. That's the essential you need for a realized soul, an acharya who can show you. So Arjuna now will again complain. Arjuna vacha. Ayati shraddhayo peto. Yogat chalita manasaha. Aprapya yoga samsiddhim. Kam gatim Krishna gacchati. So Arjuna is very pessimistic about him being able to do it, so this reflects it. Oh Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Yoga Brashta. Purport: the path of self-realization or mysticism is described in the Bhagavad Gita. The basic principle of self-realization is knowledge that the living entity is not this material body, but that he is different from it, and that his happiness is in eternal life, bliss, and knowledge. These are transcendental, beyond both body and mind. Self-realization is sought by the path of knowledge, by the practice of the Eightfold System, or by Bhakti Yoga. So the Dhyana-yoga, or Bhakti Yoga. In each of these processes, one has to realize the constitutional position of the living entity, his relationship with God, and the activities whereby he can reestablish the lost link and achieve the highest perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness. Following any of the above-mentioned three methods, one is sure to reach the supreme goal sooner or later. This was asserted by the Lord in the second chapter. Even a little endeavor on the transcendental path offers a great hope for deliverance. Out of these three methods, the path of Bhakti Yoga is especially suitable for this age because it is the most direct method of God realization. To be doubly assured, Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna to confirm his former statement. One may sincerely accept the path of self-realization, but the process of cultivation of knowledge and the practice of the Eightfold Yoga system are generally very difficult for this age. Therefore, despite constant endeavor, one may fail for many reasons. First of all, one may not be sufficiently serious about following the process. To pursue the transcendental path is more or less to declare war on the illusory energy. Consequently, whenever a person tries to escape the clutches of the illusory energy, she tries to defeat the practitioner by various allurements. A conditioned soul is already allured by the modes of material energy, and there is every chance of being allured again, even while performing transcendental disciplines. This is called yogat chalita manasaha, deviation from the transcendental path. Arjuna is inquisitive to know the results of deviation from the path of self-realization. So this is also true, of course, for the Bhakti Yoga, the Bhakti Yogi, that there are pitfalls, and that's why we have so many books of instruction, such as the Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita. And we're given so many warnings, you know, atyahara payasascha padalpo niyamagraha janasangascha lauyuncha chadbir bhakti vinashyati. Overeating, over-collecting, strong endeavor for material things, nonsense talk, and not following the processes of devotional service, or following them, just going through the motions without actually having any heart in it or any attention, and association with non-devotees, and laulyam, greed for things. These are all impediments on the bhakti path. So they're laid out there. Then there's things that are important to cultivate. Utsaha nishchaya dharya tat karma pavartanat sangha tyagat sato vritte should be bhakti prasiddhyati. Enthusiasm, determination, patience. In what? In relation to what? Into relation to all the regulated practices that we've from. Tat karma pavartanat. Giving up the association of non-devotees and following in the footsteps of the great acharyas. So these practical instructions are there, and we have nice commentary Srila Prabhupada has written. So the process is available. And kam gatim. So what's the destination? So we know the destination of the unsuccessful bhakti yogi. He practiced 10%, he starts at 11% next life. No loss and no diminution. It's very hopeful. But then the question, well, why prolong the agony? You really want to spend life in the womb again? You really want to go through that and come back in this world with, climate change? I mean, heavens. The glaciers are melting. Antarctica is melting. We're sitting here on the beach, basically. Why come back? The last chapter, that's, I don't know if you've seen that book, Coming Back. It's a famous, you haven't seen Coming Back? Yeah, there's a book. We've had it since the 70s. It's a very nice book. It was written basically by devotees. There may be one chapter in it by Prabhupada. Mukunda Maharaj wrote, and he wrote the last chapter. And after, what's really nice about it is that it gives some empirical evidence for transmigration of the soul. You've heard of some, people, some kids that remember, like that. So, but then after describing transmigration and all these things, and the last chapter is entitled, Don't Come Back. Don't come back. It's all about Krishna consciousness. So we don't want to come back, but we may come back because we haven't completed the course, but we're encouraged, But still, it's possible if we're really serious to not come back at all. Make this our last birth. So that's, Arjuna is not sanguine. He's not hopeful about this process. And he's more or less representing us. Well, what happens if you fail? Then he gives the example here, which we will talk about next week. And that is the riven cloud. You give up your material life, hoping to become a yogi, but then you fail in your yoga. Well, your material life is wrecked already. Your wife already left the kids. And now what? I went to practice Ashtanga yoga, and I didn't complete. I'm like a riven cloud. I have no, I have no standing in either sphere. So that's so Krishna will encourage him. But don't worry. If you don't succeed, you get the birth in a Shuchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta, the Yoga Brashta Bhajayate. You get born in a wealthy family, but pious, so that you won't have to worry about it. You'll be able to practice, like that. So ultimately, Krishna says, "Don't worry." Yoginam abhisarvasham agatena kadam. All right, I'll end with a little poem. What should I? All right, we don't have time for this one, the whole thing, but what could be nicer than this? Radheti nama navasundara siddha mugdam, Krishneti nama manurapata gada dugdham, Savakshanam surabhiraga himenaram nam kritvata daiva pibame rasane chudarte. An excellent fresh nectar drink with endless subtle taste, such is the name of Radha, by whom all three worlds are graced. Condensed milk that is wonderfully delicious, thick and sweet, such is the name of Krishna, in whom all attractions meet. Now mix these drinks, O thirsty tongue, and add the cooling, fragrant spice of love, a prize the wise will try to buy at any price. And then, at every moment, drink this beverage most fine, and make my heart supremely blissful, peaceful, and divine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we're missing our friends, Radhamandal and Jean. It's Wednesday. Yeah. They must be on some mission somewhere. Hare Krishna. All right. Yeah, text 38 on Monday. All right, let's get ready for our tea.